Hello, today I'll be presenting my lesson on critical literacy through digital graph. The purpose of this lesson is to support students to create, interpret, and critically analyze digital graph. This lesson connects to Mathematics Syllabus Outcome MAOWM01, where students develop understanding and fluency in mathematics by exploring and connecting mathematics concepts, solving problems, and communicating their thinking and reasoning clearly. The learning intention for students to create graph and interpret digital graph, identify feature of a clear and accurate graph, comparing different type of graph, and think critically about how graph can influence people understanding of data. The digital text I selected is NTES KidZone Create a Graph. I chose this text because it allows students to enter their own data, choose different type of graph, and edit features such as title, label, volume, and layout. They support math learning because students practice representing and interpreting data in different ways. For example, the same data may look different depending on the graph type, scale, title, or label used. Before beginning this lesson, students would need some prior knowledge. They should know how to collect simple data from a class survey, how to read basic graphs such as bar graph and pie chart, how to identify a graph title, label, categories, volume, and scale, how to compare data using mathematical language such as more than, less than, highest, lowest, and equal. That graph I use to show information visually. That digital text can include number, image, symbol, label, and interactive feature. Our learning intention is to create, interpret digital graph using data, identify the feature of a clear and accurate graph, compare how different type of graph represent the same information, think critically about how graph can influence people understanding of data. Successful criteria is we can enter data into a digital graphing tool, choose a suitable graph type for data, add a clear titles, label and value to graph, explain what graph showing using mathematical language, compare two different type of graphs and explain which one is clearer, identify how graph could be confusing or misleading, ask critical question about digital data. To begin with the lesson, I would ask the student where they see graph. In everyday life, such as new websites, sports, social media, I would then introduce the NCES Create a Graph tool on the whiteboard and explain that graph are not just math display. They are digital text created by people and they can influence how viewers understand information. As a class, I would simply collect data from them, such as how they travel to school. I then modify how to enter the data, choose a graph type, add title, label, value, and check the scale. Students would compare the same data as bar graph and pie chart. They then would discuss which graph is clear, which one is easier to read. After this, students would work in pairs or small groups to create their own digital graph using another class data. They would explain what their graph shows, why they choose this graph, and one way their graph could be clearer. The class survey make the task more meaningful because students are working with real information. The use of interactive whiteboard also helps students clearly see each step before they create their own graph. Parent group work encourage students to collaborate, discuss their choice, and making decisions together. Students are actively involved in choosing their data, graph type, title, and labels and scale. Sharing their graph with class also support confident communication and participation. The lesson promote critical literacy because students learn that graphs are not always neutral. Students can question how graph can change the way the information is understood, comparing a bar and a pie chart. Students analyze whether a graph is clear, fair, accurate, or potential misleading. Guided question encourage students to think beyond the number and consider the message of the graph. Students develop critical thinking by asking and could this support students to become more critical reader of digital information in everyday context. The full resources is used to support student deeper understanding of digital graph. As code breaker, student identify graph features such as title, label, axis, scale, value. Text participants, student making meaningful by connecting the data to familiar class experience such as transport, school, or favorite sport. Text user, student understood the purpose of the graph as digital text used to organize, compare, and communication. Text analyst, student critically question whether the graph is clear, fair, accurate, or misleading. To evaluate the impact of the lesson, I will use observation, student discussion, complete work, and exit ticket. I will observe how students participate in class, discussion, and group work, whether they can identify key graph features such as title, label, value, and scale graph. I would ask the student complete digital graphs to see if they are clear, accurate, and appropriate for data. Student written explanation would also show whether they can explain what their graph shows and justify their graph choice. The exit ticket would help access whether they can reflect critically by explaining one thing they learned, one way a graph can be misleading, and one question they would ask when reading the graph online. For this lesson, the resource I use include an interactive whiteboard or projector, the website to the Create a Graph tool, the class survey data that we collect from student device or shared classroom, and then a graph analysis worksheet and a reflection paper and an exit ticket template. And this is my reference, and this is the end of the presentation. I'm so sorry for going over time, but I want to explain all the information clearly, and I hope I did. Thank you.